If you are living on Social Security right now, you really need to hear this, because January is bringing changes to when your money hits your account. I do not want you getting caught off guard. When the dates shift, even by a few days, it can throw everything off. Rent, utilities, groceries, medications. For January, deposits are scheduled for the 2nd day of January, the 14th day of January, the 21st day of January, and the 28th day of January, depending on your birthday and when you first started collecting benefits. And here is the part people miss. If you receive supplemental security income, your January payment is actually coming early on the 31st day of December because the 1st day of January is a federal holiday. It sounds simple, but timing is everything when you are on a fixed income. For over 10 years, I have worked with seniors all across America, helping them understand how these systems really work so they can protect their savings and feel calmer about money. I do not do hype. I do not do scare tactics. I just want you to feel prepared, confident, and in control of what is happening with your Social Security deposit this January. So, let us walk through it together, slowly, clearly, and without the complicated jargon. For so many people, these payment dates are not just numbers on a calendar, they are lifelines. When that deposit lands, bills get paid, prescriptions get filled, pantries get stocked, and when it shows up later than expected, even by just a few days, stress builds fast. I have sat at kitchen tables with retirees who felt embarrassed, worried, even ashamed, thinking they had somehow done something wrong when the money did not arrive when they expected. But it is not your fault. The system moves dates around because of holidays, weekends, and scheduling rules, and nobody sits down to explain it in plain English. When you know exactly what to expect ahead of time, you make calmer choices. You can plan which bills get paid first. You can avoid overdraft fees. You can avoid borrowing just to get through the week. Knowledge takes the anxiety out of the month. So, as we go through January's schedule and the little details that come with it, remember this. You deserve clarity. You deserve peace of mind. And you deserve to understand how the money you worked your entire life for is actually being delivered. One thing I have learned after sitting with thousands of retirees is this. The dates themselves matter more than most people realize. When you are working, your paycheck usually shows up on the same day every week or every 2 weeks. But in retirement, Social Security becomes the main source of income. And it does not always feel predictable. A shift of 3 or 4 days can mean the difference between paying a bill on time or getting hit with a fee you cannot afford. It can mean waiting to buy groceries or delaying a prescription refill. And none of that is because someone is irresponsible. It is simply because the timing changed and nobody warned them. When you are living on a fixed income, there is not a lot of wiggle room. So understanding these dates is not about memorizing rules. It is about protecting your peace of mind. When you can look at your calendar and say, okay, that is the day my deposit shows up, you stop guessing. You stop worrying every time you check your bank app. And instead of reacting at the last minute, you plan ahead calmly. That is what I want for you. Less stress, fewer surprises, and more confidence about what is coming in and when. Now, let me share something that clears up a lot of confusion. Many people wonder why Social Security does not just pay everyone on the same day like it used to. Years ago, before 1997, that is exactly how it worked. Almost everyone received their check on the same date each month. And while that sounded simple, behind the scenes, it was a complete bottleneck. Banks were flooded, phone lines were overwhelmed, delays stacked up, and when something went wrong, it went wrong for millions of people at the exact same time. So, the Social Security Administration made a change. Instead of one giant payday, they spread payments across different weeks of the month tied to your birth date, and in some cases, when you first started receiving benefits. It was not meant to confuse anyone. It was meant to keep the system running smoothly, so deposits arrive more reliably. But here is the problem. Nobody really sat down with everyday retirees and explained it clearly. And when you do not know why something changed, it can feel unfair, random, or out of your control. My goal here is to slow it down, explain the why, and help you see that once you understand how the schedule works, you can build your month around it instead of feeling blindsided. So, let us slow down and talk through what January actually looks like, because this is where people get tripped up. The first group is made up of folks who started receiving Social Security before May of 1997. You follow the older system, which means your payment shows up right at the beginning of the month. For January, that deposit lands on the second day of January. If that date ever falls on a weekend or a holiday in the future, the payment simply shifts to the business day before. It does not disappear. It does not get lost. It just moves slightly earlier. Now, for everyone who filed for benefits after May 1997, your schedule works differently. Your payment date is connected to your birthday, not the month, just the day. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th, you are paid on the second Wednesday of the month, which lines up with that January 14th date. If your birthday falls between the 11th and the 20th, you are paid on the third Wednesday, which in January is the 21st. And if your birthday falls between the 21st and the 31st, your deposit arrives on the fourth Wednesday, which is January 28th. Once you understand which group you are in, your schedule stays consistent month after month. There is no guessing. There is no random shifting. It follows the same pattern every time. And that predictability is what allows you to plan your bills around it, instead of constantly worrying about when the money is coming. Now, there is one more group that needs special attention because this is where people get caught off guard. Those receiving Supplemental Security Income. Normally, these payments are deposited on the first of each month. But when the first falls on a federal holiday like New Year's Day, the Social Security Administration sends the money early. That means instead of receiving your January deposit on January 1st, it arrives on December 31st. And here is where the trouble starts. Because that money shows up at the end of December, it can feel like extra cash, like a little boost right before the new year. But it is not extra. It is your January money. I have seen so many people spend it thinking another payment is coming a few days later, and then January feels painfully long. So, the best thing you can do is mentally label it as next month's check the moment it arrives. Write it on your calendar. Put a sticky note near your bank statement. Treat it exactly the way you would if it arrived in January, because your bills in January are still going to expect to be paid. When you think of it that way, instead of feeling confused or shortchanged later, you stay steady, prepared, and in control. Another piece of this puzzle that creates confusion every single year is the cost of living adjustment. You hear about it on the news, you read about it in the papers, and it almost sounds like a raise. The government announces a percentage, everyone repeats the number, and people start thinking, great, maybe this year will finally feel a little easier. And listen, the adjustment is meant to help. It is designed so that when prices rise, groceries, utilities, gas, basic living costs, your Social Security does not stay frozen while everything else gets more expensive. But here is the part nobody really explains clearly. The increase raises the gross amount on paper. It does not automatically mean you will feel a dramatic difference in your pocket. I have had so many seniors tell me they said I was getting more, but my deposit barely changed. And that is because the adjustment and real life are not the same thing. It raises the benefit, but other deductions rise too. So instead of thinking of it as free extra money, I want you to think of it as the system trying to keep you from falling further behind. It helps, but it does not magically solve inflation. Understanding that ahead of time keeps expectations realistic and prevents disappointment when you finally see the deposit hit. Now here is where things really connect. Medicare Part B premiums. And this is the part that surprises almost everyone at some point. Medicare premiums are taken out automatically from most Social Security benefits before you ever see the money. That means when you look at your bank account, you are not seeing the full benefit. You are seeing what is left after Medicare has taken its share. So, let us walk through this in simple terms. Imagine your Social Security goes up because of the adjustment. That increase shows up on paper, in letters, in statements, but then Medicare premiums tick higher the same year. The government does not send the full amount and then ask you to write a check later. They subtract it first. So the number that arrives in your account might only be a little higher than last year, even though technically your benefit increased more. And none of that is your fault. You did not miscalculate. You did not miss anything. The system is just structured so Medicare gets paid first, automatically. Once you understand that, the shock goes away. Instead of wondering, why did I not get my full raise? You can say, okay, this is the new net amount. This is what I have to work with. And that clarity is powerful, because clarity helps you plan instead of worry. There is also something built into the system that a lot of people have never even heard of, and it quietly protects many seniors every single year. It is called the hold harmless provision. I know that sounds like government language, but the idea behind it is actually simple and surprisingly kind. It prevents your Social Security check from going down just because Medicare premiums go up. So, if your Social Security benefit is on the smaller side and an increase in Medicare would normally make your check shrink, the government limits how much Medicare can take so your monthly deposit does not get smaller. You may not see a big increase, but you will not see your check drop either. Now, this does not apply to everyone. Some people with higher incomes or those newer to Medicare may not fall under this rule. But if you have ever wondered why your check did not go backwards even when Medicare premiums increase, this is probably the reason. And I want you to hear this clearly. That protection exists because lawmakers understood that seniors living on limited income cannot afford to lose even $10 or $20 a month. It is one of the few parts of the system that genuinely tries to make sure people are not harmed by changes they cannot control. Knowing it is there can bring a little peace of mind. Another piece that confuses nearly everyone at first is how Social Security actually pays you. Social Security is paid in arrears, which is just a fancy way of saying you get paid for last month, not the current one. So the money that shows up in January is actually your benefit for December. The money that lands in February is your benefit for January. For people who are already retired, it just feels like the normal rhythm of income. But when someone first starts Social Security, this timing can be a real shock. They retire, they expect the money to start right away, and then they discover there is a delay, because the benefit is calculated and paid after the month is over. I have talked with so many people who did not realize that, and ended up with a gap they were not prepared for. That is why I always encourage future retirees to have at least a small cushion, even a month or two of expenses saved if possible, so they are not panicking while waiting for that first deposit. It is not that anything is wrong. It is simply how the system was designed decades ago. Once you understand that Social Security is always paying you for the previous month, sudden delays and timing shifts make a lot more sense, and the fear that something is broken starts to fade. Whenever I talk about timing gaps, delayed checks, or unexpected expenses, I always come back to something that is not exciting, but it truly makes life calmer. Having a small emergency buffer. And I want to say this gently, because I know many people feel frustrated or even ashamed when they hear advice about saving money in retirement. I am not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. I am talking about slowly, patiently setting aside whatever you can, even if it is $10 or $20 at a time, until you have at least a little breathing room. Because here is what I have seen over and over again. The stress does not always come from how much someone makes. It comes from how close they are to zero all the time. When every bill depends on the deposit hitting exactly on time, one tiny delay feels like a crisis. But when you have even a small cushion sitting in savings, suddenly things feel less scary. If Social Security lands a day late, you are okay. If your car battery dies or your prescription costs a little more, you can handle it without panic. I have watched people who never thought they could save build up a few hundred just by setting aside small amounts consistently. And the way they talk changes, they sleep better. They do not check their bank account 10 times a day. They feel in control again. That is what I want for you. Not perfection, not pressure, just enough margin so you can breathe. Now, another way to reduce stress around Social Security payments is by making sure the money arrives in the safest and most reliable way possible. These days, almost all Social Security benefits are sent electronically, either through direct deposit into a bank account or onto a government approved debit card. And I know some people miss the old paper checks because they could hold them, see them, feel like they were real. But checks get lost. They get delayed in the mail. They get stolen. And when that happens, replacing them can take time. Time most retirees simply do not have when bills need to be paid. With direct deposit, the money goes straight into your account on your scheduled day, often first thing in the morning. There is no waiting on the mail carrier, no worrying about whether the envelope will arrive, no standing in line to cash it. It is simpler, faster, and much more secure. And if you do not have a traditional bank account, that is okay. There are debit card options specifically designed for Social Security recipients that work the same way. The key idea is this: the fewer moving parts between the government sending the money and you receiving it, the fewer chances there are for problems. I have helped so many seniors switch to direct deposit, and the most common thing they tell me afterward is, I wish I had done this sooner. I do not worry anymore. And that peace of mind is worth a lot. One question I hear all the time is, can I call Social Security and ask them to move my payment to a different day? And I truly wish the answer were yes, because I know how much simpler it would make things for a lot of people. But the truth is, once your payment date is set, either by your birthday or by when you first started receiving benefits, it does not change. The system is not personal, and it is not based on anyone's individual situation. It is designed to handle tens of millions of payments every single month in an organized way. So even if you explain that your rent is due earlier, or your bills pile up before your deposit arrives, Social Security simply cannot move your date. And I want you to hear this clearly. That does not mean you did anything wrong, and it does not mean the government is ignoring you. It just means the system is rigid. Knowing that ahead of time saves you the emotional energy of hoping, calling, waiting on hold, and feeling disappointed when the answer is still no. Instead of trying to bend Social Security to fit your life, the goal is to shape your financial calendar around the date you already know is guaranteed. And this is where something surprisingly simple can make a huge difference. While you cannot change your Social Security date, in many cases, you actually can change when your bills are due. Most mortgage companies, credit card companies, utility providers, and even some insurance companies are willing to adjust due dates if you call and explain that you are on a fixed income and your Social Security comes at a certain time each month. I have sat with clients while they picked up the phone and I have heard the conversations myself. They will say, my payment comes on the third Wednesday. Could we move my due date to right after that? And more often than not, the company says yes. Sometimes they will move it a week, sometimes two. Sometimes they adjust your billing cycle entirely. Is it a little bit of work up front? Yes. But once it is done, your financial life suddenly lines up with the way your income actually arrives. Instead of scrambling in the first week of the month, you know your bills are scheduled after your deposit hits. And when you combine that with automatic payments, only after you know the dates line up, something shifts inside. The panic settles down. The late fees disappear, and month after month, things begin to feel steadier, calmer, and more predictable. That is not about being perfect with money. That is about designing your finances to match the reality of retirement. Something else that comes up a lot, especially with married couples, is what to do when both people receive Social Security, but the checks come on different weeks. At first, it can feel messy and frustrating. One spouse might get paid early in the month, the other later, and it feels like the money is always coming and going at the wrong time. But when you slow down and look at it differently, that situation can actually work in your favor. Instead of thinking of it as one big monthly paycheck, think of it as two smaller pay cycles that help spread things out. I have worked with couples who felt constantly behind until they sat down together and assigned different responsibilities to each check. Maybe one deposit covers groceries, gas, and smaller weekly expenses. Maybe the other covers bigger bills like rent, utilities, and insurance. When each spouse knows, my check takes care of this, your check takes care of that, the arguments ease, the confusion disappears, and suddenly you are working as a team instead of feeling like the calendar is against you. And I always remind couples, you are not doing anything wrong because your dates are different. That is just the way the system is set up. The real success comes from coordinating, communicating, and deciding together how each deposit will support your household instead of both of you trying to guess as you go. Now, as January approaches, I want you to picture something simple. A quiet moment at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, a calendar, and your list of bills. This does not have to be complicated. Start by writing out every bill you have, roughly when it is due and about how much it costs. Then, circle the exact date your Social Security hits in January. If you are in the group that gets paid on January 2nd, you know your money comes early, which means you will want to make sure the essentials get covered right away. If you are someone whose deposit lands mid-month, like the 14th, 21st, or 28th, then your job is to make sure you have enough to get through the first part of the month without panic. When you see everything laid out in front of you, your income, your bills, your dates, the mystery disappears. And once you know the timing, that is when automation becomes powerful. You can schedule key bills to be paid a few days after your deposit lands, so it happens quietly in the background without you having to remember every single due date. What is left afterward is what you truly have to work with. No more guessing, no more surprises, and little by little, January stops feeling like a month you have to get through and starts feeling like a month you have a handle on. That sense of control, especially in retirement, is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. There is something I always try to talk about with honesty and compassion because it matters, and it is not meant to scare anyone. Social Security was never designed to carry the full weight of retirement by itself. When the program was first created, it was meant to be a safety net, something to help, something to support, something to keep people from falling through the cracks. Over the years, though, more and more Americans ended up relying on it as their main source of income because pensions disappeared, savings were harder to build, and life became more expensive. So, when the check feels small, or when increases do not seem to keep up with real-life prices, it is not because you failed. It is not because you did something wrong. It is simply that the system was never built to do everything. That is why planning, even late in life, still matters. Maybe it is finding little ways to reduce expenses. Maybe it is using community resources. Maybe it is finding safe, simple ways to create a bit of extra income. Every small decision adds up. And my hope is that instead of feeling discouraged, you feel empowered, like you understand the rules of the game better now, and you can make choices that support your peace of mind rather than constantly reacting to whatever happens next. As we wrap up, I want you to take a deep breath and remember this. You have already done a lifetime of hard work. You raised families, paid taxes, showed up for jobs, supported communities, and built a country that still relies on the foundation your generation created. You deserve clarity. You deserve respect. And you deserve to know exactly when your money is coming and how to plan around it without fear. My goal every time I sit down to share these conversations is simple: to help you feel steadier, calmer, and more confident about the financial side of retirement. If this conversation helped you understand January's Social Security schedule a little better, I am truly glad. And if you think someone else could benefit, a friend, a neighbor, maybe a family member who is also retired, feel free to share it with them. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Thanks for spending this time with me. I am always here to help you protect your peace of mind and move through retirement with confidence.